Okay, cool. Let me share my screen. Okay. So I was thinking for today's class, we could try something different. I know you mentioned last time, Michael, about doing possibly a code along. And I was thinking, I don't like the code along per se, but I was thinking we can do something similar where I kind of throw out like like a like I tell you guys what to do. Like I'll tell you create a class or create a module, and then you guys kind of do it. And obviously you guys are gonna get stuck, and that's completely fine. But I'm gonna show you guys how to do it. Maybe show you an example, and then I'll tell you, okay, now you guys create it, and we'll just go from there. So I'm thinking, let me see. For this, everybody needs a code editor, and you need your terminal, and that's it, and a browser. So I assume all of you have that ready, and you guys can participate, right? Anybody anybody is not able to participate? Is anybody who can't participate? Okay, great. All right, let's just get started. So let me see. Okay. So we're gonna start working on not the restaurant. Yeah, no, not the restaurant page, but the to-do list. So we're gonna get started on this project, and the way we're gonna get started on it, this is gonna be very similar to the what's it called, the restaurant page. I mean, the only thing in between the restaurant page assignment and the to-do list is that the object-oriented principles. So there's not really much there. So it's really, at the end of it's just the same as the restaurant page. Everything that you guys have done up to the restaurant page, that's basically what you guys are going to use for that final project in that section. Okay, so let's get started. So for this to-do list, the idea is simple. It's to create a to-do list web app where you can create a to-do list, delete a to-do list, mark a to-do list as complete. I don't know if we're going to get to all the functionality aspect. I just want to get started setting up the project. But after that, yeah, you guys are going to be able to do all that stuff that I just mentioned. What else? There has to be, let me scroll down. There has to be like at least 2 categories of to-dos. So you guys pick the categories. I guess it could be, I think you can just, the 2 categories can literally be completed or incomplete. I think that's acceptable, those acceptable categories. What else? Actually, right here, point number 5 lists all the things that you should be able to do. View all projects, view all to-dos in each project. Expand a single to-do to see edit its details. Okay, so edit and delete a to-do. And it's missing and obviously create a to-do, right? So then I show some examples. I've seen own project students get really fancy with that, like look-wise. It's crazy. But like I said, we're not too worried about making it look amazing at this point. That can come later. We're just focusing on functionality. And we're gonna try to use local storage to store the to-dos because we're not using database yet. So right now it's so that's like the most intermediate way of storing data between not storing anything at all and storing it in a database is using local storage. So if everybody can pull up the editor, create a new folder, and open up the terminal and CD into that folder. So if everybody could start with that, that'd be great. and let me know when you guys are done.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, it's strange. I'm like, I can't hover over my mute button to mute or unmute. That's
Okay,
strange.
that's fine. Yeah. You're not creating a lot of background noise, so you're good. And I assume Stephanie's on too, right?
Yeah, I'm on.
Okay, cool. Yeah, feel free to chat, message me, message the group when you're done, or just say it out loud. Okay, Jeffrey is done.
Yeah, I'm good to go as well.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay, awesome. Okay, all right, so we're gonna do the same thing as we did with we're gonna follow the same instructions as the restaurant project, the restaurant page. So, because we're gonna start the same way. So what I did this earlier, and what I did is I came to this restaurant page, the project page, and I just started following these instructions. But actually, no, I take that back. What I did is actually I created the folders first because I remember we needed a source folder and a distribution folder. Do you guys remember that? It was just two folders that you had to create, really. But let's just actually do it this way where we follow the instructions the way they have it. So if everybody could run npm init in that directory, and that should create a package.json file. Let me know when you guys are done. And then
Okay.
after you're done, run npm install webpack. This basically what we have right here. Oh yeah, it would help if you guys have the Odin project up on this page. And actually, I'll just share the link in case. I mean, it's going to make it easier to pull it up if you don't have it up already.
Yeah, I was looking for it.
Yeah, might have to log in. I'm not sure. Yeah, so npm init is just gonna. That's like making it a. The way I look at it, npm init is telling it, I'm gonna create a like a more. I'm gonna create a more advanced JavaScript app because it's like it's not. As soon as you do npm init, you can do all kinds of stuff. You can work with modules, libraries, export, import, all those things, and you can't do that with just if you don't do it. So that's why npm init is just it makes your development a lot more powerful. That's the way I look at it. It's not a regular simple JavaScript, HTML, CSS page. Then okay, I assume everybody. Let me know when everybody's done with the second command, installing Webpack, so we can work with modules and all that stuff. Export modules, import modules. Okay. Everyone
I'm
done?
good.
Okay. Jeffrey?
I just got a weird error message. So I'm just trying
Okay,
to
good, perfect.
go back.
Yeah, error messages are good actually in this case because we want to handle them and you want to see. So if you want to share the error message with us, what'd you get? Oh, remember you might have to run sudo on some of these commands. Might require sudo depending on how you set up your Mac and permissions and all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah, feel free to share the error. It's even if it's a basic error, because there's a good chance that somebody else will run into that error at some point, if not now.
I'll just, I guess, share the
Yeah.
text I'm getting.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So I'm in the project directory.
Oh yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. I totally forgot to address that. This utility will walk you through. Yeah, if you guys do an npm init, remember to just hit, I forgot to mention that, just hit the default values. Just enter, enter, enter all the way to end. There, I mean, obviously, there's also a way to do it where you don't have to do that. It picks where you just add the flag -y, I believe, and it will just pick all the default values for you. But either way, so if you ran npm init, just keep hitting enter. Is that
okay?
Is that what it was?
Yeah. All right.
Okay,
That
cool.
was pretty easy.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm glad you mentioned that. Actually, I totally forgot about that.
I'm
Yeah.
not getting an error, but I'm getting this message, and I was wondering if I have to do this.
Okay.
Is it to update, Stephanie, your like to a new version?
Let me look.
Because I'm getting that same thing.
No,
but
that's fine, guys. That's not an error message, right? That's just
yeah.
if it's not in red and it doesn't have the word error, then you're fine. If it's a warning or just I believe that's a standard message. That's something that
Okay.
they're just looking for funding. Some of these packages, a lot of these package developers, they work for free. So,
Is it asking for money? Is that what it is?
yeah, they're asking for donations, and they actually, believe it or not, they deserve donations. They work. It's amazing to me. They create these packages for free, and they share them. And sometimes I feel guilty for not contributing because I use it all the time, but I never contribute. Sometimes I feel like I should. So, okay, great. So that's fine. So everybody do an ls. You should have a package.json file, right?
Yep.
Okay, everybody's seeing the package.json. Great.
And
now,
I need a second screen.
yeah. Oh, I can't. I wouldn't be able to code without a second screen. I definitely recommend it. I would, and then also open up your code editor and add that folder to your editor. So you should have the project now listed. If you have Atom, it should be listed on the left-hand side. So the way I do it, I usually do add project folder. That's my default way of adding a project to my editor. So if I do add project folder, then I just select whatever project I want. Just select the root folder. And it should show up it should be the root folder. So make sure you select the right level of the folder, not too high up and not too far in. So at this point, you should have only one folder, one file, package.json, correct? And then go ahead and open up package.json in Atom, and you should see a Webpack and a Webpack CLI dependency, developer dependency. Under dev dependencies, you should see those two packages listed because you guys installed it right here with that npm install webpack CLI command. So everybody got that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey,
cool.
what is CLI?
Command line interface, I believe.
Okay.
So it gives you more options. It gives you options to work with Webpack through the command line. Usually
Got
CLI, yeah, CLI. I've seen it in other packages too, where they have like a CLI version. Yeah, so it's just a command line option. Okay, cool. So I assume you guys also see a node modules folder. Is that correct? Oh, do you guys see a node modules folder and a package -lock yet or not yet?
Yes.
No, I see it.
Okay, cool. All right, awesome. If you guys want, you guys could create the Git Ignore. Oh, let's just skip that for now. We'll come back to that. Don't worry about Git stuff. I don't want to mix stuff up yet. All right. Okay, next, create a source and a distribution directory. And inside the source folder, just create an index.js file. Okay, and inside the distribution, we're going to create index.html. So yeah, so the index.html, that's the front end asset. That is, I mean, everything is front end really, but that is what gets, that's the visual aspect, that's the HTML aspect of our app. That's like the root HTML file. There's really only one HTML file at this point. And the index.js in source, that would be the root JavaScript. Simple, right? It's literally just root JavaScript, root index.html. And what I mean by root is just that's like the main source. That's where everything starts, the beginning. So in the index.html, go ahead and create a HTML boilerplate. So all the usual stuff. I usually just start typing in HT, and then it gives me an option to do an autocomplete and fills everything in. And let me know when you guys are done with all that. And also go ahead and link the main JS inside the index.html. So at the very bottom, right before you closing of the body tag, go ahead and do a script source and specify main.js.
So question about this. So main.js will be a file that will be auto-generated once we
exactly.
do, what is it?
Yes.
And yeah, run that
exactly.
Webpack
Yes,
command.
Exactly. That's when Webpack does its thing, and it takes all the modules, and it really just creates one file, which is the main.js. And so basically, it's really, what's funny is that at the end, it's really just these two, not index and index.js. It's really these two that gets loaded at the end. Webpack uses index.js to create main.js. But it's main.js and index.html that kind of gets served at the end. That's really what the browser is pulling up. So this is more used by Webpack right here. So it's kind of interesting. But that's how a lot of frameworks are. Remember what I said about input and output files. You gotta like being aware of what's an output file and what's an input file. That's gonna help you a lot. It's gonna cut out a lot of confusion. Like you don't want to mess with main.js, for example. That's an output file. Remember what I said about output files? That's something you shouldn't touch. That should be generated by the program, by the library, not by you. So let me know when you guys are done with these two steps.
I have a question.
Sure.
So the main.js, though, it's getting updated, right? Is that correct?
Yeah. So
How is that happening, though?
Yeah. So when you run the Webpack, and we're gonna run that here in a second. When you run the Webpack server or service, it will generate it constantly. Like whenever there's a change, it will update it. If you run it regular, if you run Webpack without like auto generate, then you have to, every time you make a change, like every time you change something in index.js, you have to manually restart the Webpack service in order for that to be created. But there's a way where you tell Webpack to just be on standby and pay attention to changes. So as soon as it detects a change in index.js, it will regenerate main.js. So Webpack handles that basically. So a lot
Man,
of this.
I missed. I think I blanked out last class
Mhm.
or something,
Okay.
but
Yeah, no worries.
That was probably my struggle with the homework.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So which part? Like
Well,
how
it kept
it's generated?
saying it kept saying that it couldn't find something in main.js. So I'm
Okay.
thinking it wasn't updating the changes.
Yeah, it's possible that you started it. Maybe you started the service the manual way, not instead of the auto
Yeah.
way. And we'll come to that here in a few lines, and it's going to make a little bit more sense. So let's do this one next. This is the configuration file for Webpack, and it's so create this file. You can use the command line and use the keyword touch, or you can use Atom to create a new file. Put it in the root directory, so not in source and not in distribution, just in the root directory. And what I did for the content was what I did last time. I opened up this link to the tutorial, and I scrolled down to where they have the content for Webpack, and I just copied this. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. You guys can pull it up yourself. Okay. Or you can get it from the chat box. And go ahead and put that inside the webpack config.js file. If at any point you run into any sort of problem, let me know. If you see an error message, let me know, because it would be nice to share with everybody.
Yeah, real quick
Yeah.
question about this. So I
Yeah.
was looking over this Webpack getting started link. How, if I was tackling a project completely on my own and not, where would I start with looking over this humongous instruction sheet? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I know it says to follow it like based off of a Webpack file we
Right.
create. So I did a command F and I just found that section when I was doing the homework. But I mean, if I didn't have that instruction, where would I start?
Right.
You know?
And I guess you get better at that. You get better at selectively picking things. Like, you don't need to read every part or know every part. That's not my philosophy. Some people do, to each its own, but I usually just try to pick what matters. So I look at this, and for example, let me see. So I see this, and I'm like, okay, I already did all this. So I skip this. So all of this I skip. And then I come down here. I kind of like, yeah, this is kind of like what we have. We have a source. So I skip this. Okay, nothing. Basically, up to this point, there's nothing unique there. So I'm like, okay, this is all, all stuff that we've done already. I keep skipping. There's nothing there. This is all stuff that we have already. There's that loading the main.js stuff. So there's the running the Webpack service, but I'm not worried about that yet because I knew it was coming up next. So it really came down, basically my point is, it really came down to realizing that what I really need here, what's important, is just this, the content. Like I kind of saw like, okay, that's the only thing that I don't have. And that's also, but also they said, like the own project's instructions were create this file, and that looks, and then it says refer to the tutorial. So I did. So I just got the content. I'm like, I'm not going to worry about everything else. Yeah. And like I said, a lot of this stuff comes with time and practice. So the more you do it, the more you realize what you need and what you don't need. Okay, so inside the index.html, add a div with ID content. Make sure you close it, because this one right here, this example right here, they don't close it. And also make sure when you guys copied the content for the, if anybody copied the content for the Webpack config file, make sure you take out that last line that got in there by accident. That message, now let's run the build, because that might cause an error message. Okay, is everybody good? You guys have the div?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay, so let's do this. They're saying like we want to see if it works or not. So add a alert statement in the index.js, which is remember the root.js file, the main.js file, and then after that, and here Stephanie, this is where you run the Webpack service that loads up. Okay, so you might have ran this one right here, the npx Webpack. That is not the outer one. That's not the one that watches for changes. You want to run this one right here. This is a smarter one. This is a smarter command. What this does is it, like the name suggests, it just watches for changes.
So if I did not use this one, the npx Webpack watch, that means every single time that I make a change, I had to have done npx Webpack. Is that correct?
No, what it does is every time you make a change, it should detect it and update for you. You don't have to do anything.
Okay.
So yeah, this is the great part. Like every time you make a change to source index.js, it should detect it. Yeah, so everybody run this command after you added a console log or alert statement in the index.js. And once you run it, make sure, this is important, that you get something like this, no error messages. So a warning is fine. You should see something like this in the terminal. So if this looks good, go ahead and open up the index.html in a browser. I recommend Chrome.
Cool. It's working.
Working? Anybody? Let me know if anybody ran into any issue. Any issues? Jeffrey, you good? Or are you still working on it?
Yeah, I'm still working. I'm
Okay.
just reading the
No worries.
documentation.
Okay.
Man, how long are these like other students working on this to-do list project?
I know.
Jeez, you're not kidding. They're really nice.
Oh, I know. I was like blown away.
Damn.
Yeah. No, I'm not gonna lie, they did a good job. Like, I don't know who these guys are. I don't know who these students are that take this. I feel like they're professional developers.
Oh, man.
What do you have, a master's in computer science? Okay, so Stephanie's running. Okay. Did you run into any problems, Jeffrey?
Yeah, so something was, I think I ended up creating the Webpack in one of my directories by accident. So I'm just deleting and just starting over.
Okay, no worries.
We did Webpack in my bootcamp, and it was like literally just like 2 days. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was not very in depth. So this is
yeah,
like new.
Yeah, Webpack is actually, it's good to know for sure. I struggle with Webpack myself. Like every time I would work on a front-end framework project, Webpack would always like give me a hard time. So I'm glad I'm going through this myself too. Like a lot of the stuff is actually, this stuff is actually useful. So I kind of see where own project, why they're doing this. Kind of makes sense to do
It's
that.
so much easier to work on a Mac, man. Like,
oh yeah.
I was on my PC for the longest time, and
Oh no.
I had so many issues setting up like React projects and stuff.
Oh
Like,
no, yeah, no. I used to be a Windows user, and I didn't want to switch to Mac for the longest time. I didn't like the company Apple, but once I switched, I'm like, how did I ever go without like a Mac?
yeah.
Like seriously, it's amazing. Like either Mac or Linux, but I think Mac is, I don't know. Yeah, either Mac or Linux, both. Linux is good too because a lot of the servers are Linux based. So if you get used to working with Linux, that's good because a lot of the hosting servers are Linux, like Ubuntu is very popular. So yeah, Mac is Mac is Linux based, so
Yeah.
it's not that far off. Jeffrey, still working on it. Let me know if you need. If you're
Yeah, I'm good. I'm just waiting for this to load. We can move on.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, if everybody got to this point, that's good. You set up a basic Webpack app, I guess. That was the most basic version I can think of. So what I did next is, let me see. Let's everybody open up index.js. The one, yeah. So in source, open up the index.js file. And here we're gonna do a, let me see. So the way I did it is I have one main component, if you will, or module. And let me see. Let me see what I used for this. Like, so I have one component in this file that uses two imported components from outside files. So I have one component being imported from a file called lists, and one component imported from a file called DOM. So one is in charge of the visual aspect of the app, and one is in charge of the JavaScript, like the data, the to-do lists and stuff like that. So the main component that I have in index, that's the component that's going to be in charge of connecting those two. So what I would do is, let me see, start by creating those two files. So we have, call them whatever you like. You don't have to call them list and DOM. I've seen a lot of students use the word controller, which is accurate. They're kind of controllers. So you'll see a lot of, in the real world, you'll see those components being called controllers, list controller and DOM controller. So go ahead and create two files inside of the source directory. Like I said, I called it list.js and dom.js. And once you do that, go ahead in the index.js, import two, I guess, functions or modules from those files. So in my case, I did something like this. Let me show you guys an example. Actually, let me pull it up. Let me see if I can pull it up. Maybe I can use the Odin project to show you guys an example. I used a, let's see.
Even are we working in like this MVC stuff or no? We haven't got into that.
So in what?
Like model view controller, like MVC?
Oh, I see. No, this
Okay.
is no. Model view. No, not really. No, I think that's more once we get to databases.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, once we get more into frameworks,
Mm-hmm.
model view controller. Like right now, the way it's set up, it's not so much. Yeah, model view controller. Not yet. So what I did for the main component, I think I used a module. Like I created some, so I created something like this, but I called it main instead of calculator. And I gave it two arguments. So this one doesn't have any arguments, if you can tell. Like it's just empty, but I have two I gave it two arguments, list and DOM. So go ahead and do that. And down here, when I call on myself, I gave it list and DOM as an argument. I know this is confusing, but for now, just memorize it. I mean, there's plenty of times when I had to just memorize or just remember how to do something without understanding what it does exactly. So that's fine.
Even just quickly on the two files that you told us to create in the SRC folder.
Yeah.
One of them, what are they supposed to be again? I'm sorry, but the one's supposed to hold the component we're going to create, right? And then the one's supposed to be the controller, or where we're going to just like the root.
I mean, they're both kind of controllers.
Okay.
So one is going to be in charge of the DOM, like manipulating the DOM, like the visual aspect, really, and one is going to be in charge of the JavaScript aspect of it, of the list, of the to-do list. You know, so one is like the visual, one is more the coding.
Okay.
So that's the way I would look at it. So for those two, you're going to do, when you import it, you're going to import it. Let me see if I can find an example. I don't think we have it here. The way you're going to import it is kind of like this. So import, yeah. And we haven't touched those files yet, so it's okay if they don't have any content yet. Don't worry about the content yet. Right now, we're just gonna assume that it's gonna have something inside of it. It's gonna export a function and give it a name. And let me know when you guys are done. Actually, for this one, for the index.js, once you're done, if you guys can chat, message me what you guys have. I'm just curious because I don't think I gave good instructions on that, so it might not be clear.
Yeah, because I'm a little confused because I created an index.js file I decided to call it controller.js, and then I created a list.js file in the SRC folder, and that's where I'm at now.
Okay, so let me back up a little bit. Okay, let me just put, this is what I did at the top. So everybody should have something similar to that, right?
Oh, importing it now, okay.
Yeah, so this should be at the top of your index.js file. And let me know when you guys are done with those two lines and you created those two files. Make sure, so you have to create two files, and those have to be the names. They have to match this with the JS extension. So you don't put a JS extension here because it assumes it, but when you create it, you make sure you have a JS extension. So, and these are going to be in the source directory, so the same level as the index.js. And then make sure that, and then these, in my case, they match. Yeah, good. Controller, okay, good. List and controller, okay. Yeah, in my case, they match, and Michael's case, they match too, but they don't have to match. They could be two different, that part.
I never know what to call them. I mean, like with the project we just did, I don't know, like, and that's my naming convention is not very good.
Well, that's also because Odin Project hasn't really, I've noticed they didn't really specify or clear that up. So at this point, it's fine if the naming is off. That's not a big deal. Like I said, once you get to like professional level, once you start working, you'll see right away what the naming convention is going to be. So don't worry too much about it. This is fine. Yeah, they're both kind of controllers. So you could, but it's still fine. You can call this is also like a list controller. This would be like a UI controller, but I just call them list and DOM. Just if you're not sure, pick the simplest word shortest word you can come up with. Okay, everybody good? Jeffrey, Stephanie. If not, it's fine. Just but do let me know if you guys are still working on it. I don't want to go too fast, because then it's going to be hard to catch up.
Give me 1 sec. I'm almost
Sure.
done.
Okay.
Okay, I think I'm done.
Okay. Jeffrey?
Yeah, we can move on.
Okay. All right. So did you guys create something similar to, let me copy over. So you want to have like I said, I used a module for like this component, the main component. The way I created is, so this is the signature, I guess that's what they call it, of my main functional component. So you can call it whatever else. You don't have to call it main. You can call it index. You can call it whatever else. And these are the arguments that it takes in. It happens to be the same name as, list. So I've been using the same names everywhere. So you guys should have something like this, and it should end with something like this. So that should be the end, right?
That would get stored in the index.js file.
Yeah, so this goes inside the index.js, correct? After the imports, yes. So let me know when you guys are done with that. So basically, it's just a main component that calls on itself with nothing inside of it. And once you guys are done with that, we are going to put something inside of it. And what that thing is a simple function that I called init to just initialize to kick off the program. And this is what I did for that. It starts right here, this whole thing. So I called it init. I used the arrow notation, and I have a console log, so that way I can keep track if all this is working, if it reaches this point of the program. And don't worry too much about this and this just yet, because we haven't created the content of list and DOM yet. So this might be confusing. This init in those files don't exist yet. And finally, once you're done with that, and you can, like I said, you can leave this out or put this in, it's up to you. Make sure you use the right terms though. Don't use list and DOM if you called yours something else. Those names should be matching the argument lists, like right here. They shouldn't be matching, they're not matching this stuff up here. They're matching the arguments right here. Okay, so I'll share what I have, the whole thing here in a second. It's going to become a little bit more clear. I can totally see how this might be confusing, sharing bits by bits. So, okay, this return init, I'm making sure that this init function inside of main will be available to use. So that way somebody, because I have another line at the very end of that file of index.js that calls on main.init. So I know this is confusing, so I'm just going to share what I have, the whole thing. Let me do that. So here's my file. You should have something similar. The names might be different, but everything else should be the same, really. Let me know when you guys are done with index.js. And if you're completely lost, I'm just gonna go ahead and paste this into the chat room, and you guys just can copy and paste that. That's fine. Let me know when everybody is good to go. Can we move on? Jeffrey, Stephanie. And if you have problems, let me know. Let us know, because that way we can address it. It's very important, because if you have a problem, there's a good chance somebody else will have it or has it.
I think I
Or confusion.
have a syntax error.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
let me just look through it.
Okay,
real quick.
no worries.
Even question for you. So for the init function,
Yeah.
Why did you choose, I guess, to call it init over? Because you have main and then you have init, and I'm just kind of curious your thinking there.
Yeah. I mean, it's just naming choice, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? Like, are you concerned about like the naming,
Yeah.
or you're wondering about the naming? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, I've seen, I don't know. I just had to come up with something. I figured this is kind of like the main component. This is like the entry. You can call it entry to, you can call it index. All those are fine. I don't know. I just chose main. Not a big deal. Something that kind of makes sense. You don't want to call it something, something like to do, right?
Right. Yeah.
That kind of feels off, right? If you call it to do, because to do kind of represents a single to do. So you don't want to, even though it's a to do app, you don't want to call it to do, because that's not really what this does, right? It's not. This is the main component. This is the entry point. This is the index that kicks everything off. So that's why to do would be off. So anything that kind of makes sense is fine. And then init is, yeah, like kicking off, calling on list init. So it says, okay, so this is saying, this is like the first point of the program, and it's saying, go ahead. It tells list, go ahead and do your thing. I don't know what that thing is. It's hidden to us. It's hidden to main, but go ahead and take care of your init. And then it tells DOM, go ahead and take care of your init. So main is telling everybody else below it, like kind of main is kind of like the boss and telling everybody, its workers, go ahead do your initialization, do your, your part. So then, yeah, so they take care, and that's what object-oriented programming is. Each component is in charge of its own initialization. Like we don't have in this init, we don't have all the stuff that list is supposed to do. We don't do it here, right? Like, it's not like we're just outsourcing it, and we don't know how it looks like. We don't need to know how it looks like. All we need to know is that it does it. We tell it to do it, and it does it. Yeah. It's just a smarter way of programming. And yeah, and don't worry about the syntax. This is confusing, because it's confusing to me even. I know at one point it's going to be less confusing to me, but at this point, if it's a little bit confusing, that's fine. You just move on. There will be a time when it will make perfect sense. Okay, so everybody good? Or
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, let's move on. So go ahead and hop over to either DOM or list. Let's go to whatever you called it, and you're gonna create these functions that we're exporting. And what I did for those, I used so over here I used a module, right? So let me see. For those other ones, let me just show you how I got to where I used a init. Oh, I used the same thing. So for those, so I create. Let me show you guys. And we're running out of time, so I'm just going to show you guys. It'll be, so I use, this module, this way of creating an object, this module way. I did the same thing in DOM and list. So if you look over here, you'll see I called on myself right here, but this one doesn't have an argument. See that? No argument provided and no argument defined. So I called it DOM, and over here, this was called main, right? There's DOM and there's main. The difference is here, I call on init inside main, and I don't export it. I don't export main. Why is that? And in DOM, I export DOM. Why is it that? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm assuming because you're gonna pull in that function from a different file and then export it, right? You're gonna use it. I mean,
which one?
I forget the. I know. I think what you have one file that you're exporting, so that's DOM, and then you have. Yes. Let's see.
And main is not exported, but they're both set up the same way. So like there's main, calling itself type format. There's DOM, but over here I'm exporting DOM, but over here I'm not exporting main. Why is that? Why am I not exporting main? It's actually simpler than you guys think. Like a lot of times because it's so confusing and all that stuff, it's easy to fall into the trap that it's complex. But the solution, the reason is actually quite simple. One, we import. The other, we don't import. Main is never imported anywhere. Have you noticed?
Well, because this is your main.
Yeah, exactly. This is like the root. Yeah, it's at the top.
Yeah.
It sits like right there at the top. It's the boss. It's it's in charge of everything. It doesn't need anybody else. Like it doesn't. No one else is importing main. Because then where does it stop? If you import that, and then it's just endless. So like you have to have some sort of root file that doesn't get exported, and imported. Doesn't need to be exported and doesn't get imported. But DOM, we need it. We need DOM right here, right? So we need it right there. So that's why we're exporting DOM right there. And then inside of DOM, so this is like an object. The way I look at it, it's an object that has functions inside of it and attributes inside of it. In this case, it only has one function called init, just like main has init. You can call it something different. The naming always confuses people, but don't worry too much about the naming aspect. But like in this case, they're the same. And so I have one function called init. And you guys, by the way, go ahead and type this out too, like write this out. And I can actually share too, because we're running out of time. So we just want to finish up these next two. These next two files, DOM and list, and we should be good. And then same thing with list, right? I did the same thing with list. Let me just get rid of this. Okay, there's one other thing that I don't know if I'm gonna have time to address, but let me share this first. So there's DOM, and there's list. Another thing, over here we're returning init, right? See that? There's a function, this is all happening inside of DOM. Remember where you are in the code. You are inside of DOM. Inside of DOM, there's a function called init, and that you're returning with the curly braces. You're saying like you make it available. So over here, we did the same thing. Okay, so it's no different than what we had in main. So that part shouldn't be too confusing, actually. It's just actually the syntax or the way I structured it is kind of off. It's kind of different. So, okay, that's better. Yeah, let me do it this way. So it looks the same in all three. Okay, so if you guys, once you guys have all this, if you reload the page, first of all, actually what I would do, make sure that you have this still running and it's still up and there's no error messages. If this is still running and there's no error messages, reload the page, the index.html, and open up the console, and you should see those messages. There's a good chance that you ran into some sort of bug somewhere along the way, because there's a lot of things that could go wrong, and and it wasn't the best way, the way I conveyed the code. So let me know if somebody succeeded. Who sees all three messages? You should see a message from main, or the index.js, and then from the other two components. Has anybody succeeded?
Because like a syntax error.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Like I said, this was not the smoothest way. So no one sees the three messages, right?
You know what it was? I don't know if you guys experienced this, Jeffrey, Stephanie, but like when I actually just tried to copy over one of your functions here, the DOM one, and I was getting all these weird characters added. It wouldn't allow me to just drop it into my editor, so I had to type it out.
Oh,
But,
okay.
Yeah. The question mark, like little circle
Yeah.
things. Yeah, I got those too. So I typed it out, but I still have a syntax error. So.
All right, let me copy paste it into Slack. That might, I don't know if encoding is better there. So that's the list component. And there's so copy paste it from Slack. And then there's the DOM one. And I'll do the same thing for main. And then there's main. I really want to see if one of you sees all three messages at least.
So we're supposed to see three messages, right?
Yeah, so if you go to index.html, refresh the page, you should see three messages.
Okay, yeah, I think, yeah, I ended up just copying and pasting whatever you had
it worked?
Here. Yeah,
and it worked?
It's working. Yeah.
Okay, cool, good. Anybody else? Share any error messages, syntax error you have, and then that way we can debug it.
I should have just called it DOM too, because
yeah, it's fine. It's actually that's yeah. Okay, well we'll stop here. See if you guys if you got an error, just go ahead and try to fix it. That would be good. That'd be good practice. And
mine's working out, by the way, too. I just had to change the name.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's good. It's good practice. If you run into an error, try to resolve it. All right, cool. So yeah, so that should get you started with like the frame of the final project for this section, the to-dos list. Obviously, the bulk of it is not there yet, but at least the frame is there. So the basic setup is there. You can add more components, less components, change the names, all that stuff. But now at least you know how to load the modules, get Webpack running. Now you just got to add stuff to it. I've seen people use classes, inside of their modules. So you can do that, whatever you like. Just be consistent, I would say. Most important thing is to be consistent. So if you do, if you decided to use classes, then use classes throughout every component, So don't do classes in one and, factory function in another, or whatever else there is. And that inconsistency is just not very appealing. All right, let's stop here. I gotta take off. Okay, and just as always, just Slack the group if you run into any problems or if you need help. And yeah, I would say you know what? I would recommend actually dropping every other project assignment and focusing on to do. And the reason for that is because that's the one that brings everything together. So even if you're still stuck on an older one, this will kind of make up for it, because this still deals with the same stuff. So I would say everybody focus on to-dos if possible. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Awesome, guys. All right. Talk to you guys tomorrow.
Sounds good. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Take
Bye.
care.